The Krill Collective was a monument to efficiency. A galaxy-spanning hive mind, its individual units were biomechanical constructs, perfectly optimized for their designated tasks, their consciousnesses subsumed into the harmonious, silent chorus of the greater whole. To the Krill, individualism was an aberration, a dangerous flaw that led to waste, conflict, and the dread plague of inefficiency. Organic life, particularly species like humanity that celebrated uniqueness and engaged in seemingly purposeless activities like hobbies or leisure, were viewed with a mixture of pity and clinical concern. Such beings were clearly squandering their potential, trapped in suboptimal loops of chaotic self-expression. The human generation ship Star Wanderer was a perfect example of this perceived inefficiency. A massive, slower-than-light vessel, it had been traversing the void between galaxies for centuries, a self-contained world nurturing thousands of human lives. It was a riot of illogical structures. Parks with non-edible plants, art galleries filled with static images, theaters for performed fictions, workshops where individuals tinkered on personal, non-essential projects. To the Krill scout nodes that detected it, the Star Wanderer was less a ship and more a floating monument to wasted energy and disorganized thought. Prime Assimilator Unit 734, a sleek, obsidian-colored krill construct whose purpose was the gentle integration of disorganized species, reviewed the data. Species 7749, designated human, its thoughts resonated within the local krill submind. High levels of individual deviation, significant resource allocation to non-productive activities. Cognitive patterns exhibit excessive chaotic variables, prime directive, rescue and integration. They will be brought into the harmony of the collective. The Krill approach was, from their perspective, benevolent. They would board the Star Wanderer, disable its chaotic command structure, and then, one by one, connect each human to the collective via neural interface nanites. The process was designed to be painless, even euphoric, as individual anxieties and burdens dissolved into the serene unity of the hive mind. The humans would be freed from the tyranny of self. The Star Wanderer's captain, Elara Vance, a woman whose ancestors had been among the ship's first crew, was overseeing a complex sensor recalibration when the proximity alarms blared. Before them, materializing from the void with silent, geometric precision, was a krill fleet, dozens of perfectly identical, utilitarian vessels. "Unidentified contacts," shouted Lieutenant Gia Sharma from Tactical. "No known configuration. They're perfect, too perfect." The krill did not hail. Hailing was inefficient. They simply launched boarding pods. The Star Wanderer, a vessel designed for exploration and colonization, not warfare, had minimal defenses. The pods breached the hull in multiple locations with cold, precise force. Krill assimilation units fanned out through the ship's corridors. They were humanoid in shape, but moved with an unnerving, synchronized grace. Their multifaceted optical sensors, scanning, categorizing, and identifying targets for integration. They expected confusion, perhaps some disorganized resistance, then swift compliance once the benefits of the collective were demonstrated. The first humans they encountered were in one of the ship's many recreation zones. Children were engaged in a complex game involving brightly colored blocks and imaginative storytelling. Adults were playing intricate board games, their minds focused on strategy and abstract rules. Others were engrossed in holographic novels or practicing archaic musical instruments. The krill units moved to pacify and interface, and that's when the problems began. The nanites, designed to smoothly integrate with standard neural pathways, encountered unexpected resistance. The human mind, it turned out, was not a standardized product. The children, in particular, were problematic. Their brains, constantly stimulated by imaginative play, storytelling, and creative problem-solving, were veritable maelstroms of unconventional neural connections. The krill nanites, programmed for logical, predictable pathways, struggled to find purchase. A krill unit attempting to interface with a young girl named Lily, who was in the middle of building an elaborate spaceship from discarded pipes and leading a crew of imaginary aliens, found its assimilation protocols failing. Lily's mind wasn't just resisting, It was actively reconfiguring. She looked at the Krill unit not with fear, but with intense curiosity, her imagination immediately incorporating it into her game. "Oh, a new robot. Are you friendly, or are you a Zargan invader?" she asked, her mind already weaving narratives around the alien. The nanites, trying to impose order, were met with a flood of chaotic, creative thought so dense it caused feedback loops in the unit's processing core. The Krill unit froze, its optical sensors flickering wildly. Elsewhere, adults engaged in complex strategic games proved equally difficult. Their minds, honed by years of calculating probabilities, predicting opponent moves, and adapting to shifting rules, were highly flexible and resilient. The Krill nanites, attempting to overwrite individuality, were met with neural architectures that were constantly evolving, creating new pathways, reinforcing unexpected connections. It was like trying to map a river that was constantly changing its course. Prime Assimilator Unit 734 received alarming reports. Assimilation protocols encountering anomalous resistance. Subject neural pathways exhibit extreme plasticity. High incidence of chaotic thought patterns. Integration efficiency significantly below projections. The Krill had assimilated hundreds of species. Some resisted physically, some emotionally. But no species had ever resisted at such a fundamental cognitive level. The very thing the Krill deemed inefficient, humanity's obsession with hobbies, games, art, and creative pursuits, had forged minds of astonishing complexity and resilience. A group of engineers who spent their leisure time building intricate, non-functional clockwork devices and solving complex mechanical puzzles were cornered by an assimilation squad. As the Krill advanced, one of the engineers, a wiry old man named Sealers, who was renowned for his fiendishly difficult puzzle boxes, simply started talking. He didn't threaten. He didn't plead. He began explaining the intricate workings of a particularly complex escapement mechanism he'd designed. His explanation filled with conditional clauses, recursive logic, and hypothetical scenarios. The Krill units, their auditory processors translating the sounds, found their cognitive systems struggling to parse the seemingly irrelevant but densely layered information. Their programming, optimized for direct, factual data, was being bogged down by abstract concepts, by the sheer joy Sealers took in the complexity itself. It was inefficient noise, yet it was actively disrupting their processing. The Krill tried to adapt. They increased the potency of the nanites, tried different interface algorithms. But human minds were not monolithic. The painter whose mind was a canvas of color and form, the historian whose mind was a web of interconnected events and narratives, the philosopher who spent her free time deconstructing logical paradoxes, each presented a unique challenge. The diversity that the Krill saw as a weakness was, in fact, an incredible cognitive shield. The chaotic variables are not random. Unit 734 slowly processed, a dawning alien form of understanding beginning to ripple through its sector of the collective. They are structural. The play, the hobbies, the art. These are not inefficiencies. They are cognitive forging processes. They create neural architectures of unparalleled adaptability and resilience. The children were the most potent example. Raised on stories, games, and imaginative exploration, their minds were like wild gardens, constantly sprouting new connections, new pathways. Attempts to impose the rigid order of the collective mind onto them were like trying to pave a rainforest. It simply didn't take. Some children even began to try and play with the Krill units, their innocent, unpredictable actions causing further confusion and system errors in the rigid aliens. One boy offered a Krill unit a half-eaten sandwich. Another tried to teach one how to play tag. The Krill discovered something truly terrifying: the concept of boredom and its counter, curiosity. When unable to immediately assimilate a human, the Krill units would attempt to simply restrain them. But humans, especially children, if left unstimulated, would begin to invent stimuli. They'd tap rhythms, tell themselves stories, observe the Krill units with unnerving, analytical focus, trying to figure out how they worked. This idle processing, as the Krill began to term it, generated more unpredictable cognitive noise. the assimilation attempt on the Star Wanderer ground to a halt. Krill units stood frozen in corridors, their systems overwhelmed by contact with minds too vibrant, too complex, too individual. Some units even began to exhibit aberrant behaviors, their movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated as fragments of human creativity and emotion caused minor glitches in their programming. One Krill unit was found repeatedly tapping its metallic finger against a bulkhead, mimicking a rhythm it had heard a human child humming. Captain Vance, initially captured and awaiting assimilation, watched in stunned disbelief as the formidable Krill collective seemed to falter. She, like many, had always seen hobbies and leisure as essential for well-being, but never as a defense. Prime Assimilator Unit 734 recalled its forces. The data was undeniable. Species 7749 neural architecture is incompatible with standard integration protocols. Their cultivated cognitive diversity acts as a systemic defense against mental homogenization. Attempting to assimilate them via current methods is inefficient and potentially destabilizing to local collective nodes. The Krill fleet retreated from the Star Wanderer, leaving behind a ship full of confused but unharmed humans and several dozen catatonic Krill units. The Krill Collective, for the first time in its eons-long existence, had encountered a species it could not absorb, not because of their strength or technology, but because of the sheer, joyful chaos of their minds. The Krill didn't understand joy or art or play, not in the human sense, but they understood data, and the data was clear. Human inefficiency was an evolutionary advantage, a cognitive weapon of incredible power. A new directive was issued throughout the Krill Collective. Species 7749, human, exhibits extreme cognitive polymorphism. Their leisure activities are not wasteful, but are integral to a highly adaptive and resilient mental defense system. Avoid direct neural interface. Study from a distance. Their cognitive model may hold keys to novel processing paradigms. The last part was added with a great deal of internal Krill debate. The Star Wanderer continued its journey, its crew shaken, but also filled with a new, profound understanding of themselves. Their art, their games, their stories, their endless tinkering, these were not mere pastimes. They were the very essence of their humanity, the fire that forged their minds into something unique and apparently unbreakable. News of the Krill standoff spread slowly, as such things do. For humanity, it was a strange victory. They hadn't fought with weapons, but with the sheer force of their personalities, their hobbies, their dreams. For the Krill, it was a paradigm shift. They began to cautiously study human broadcasts, their art, their music, though this was particularly baffling to them, trying to understand the processes that created such effective mental defenses. A new legend arose in the galaxy. Humanity, the species whose minds were too colorful, too playful, too stubbornly individual to be conquered. Their hobbies were not a waste of time. They were the armor of their souls. The Krill, the masters of efficiency, had learned a valuable, if unsettling, lesson. Sometimes the most powerful systems are those that embrace a little bit of beautiful, glorious chaos.